before we can add the buttons to the game, we will have to import them into our project. So if you downloaded the sprites, or maybe you're using your own sprites, but if you download them, you will have 5 buttons that looks like this. And basically I'm just going to take the folder called buttons and import it into my sprites folder here. And to do that, I'll simply just have to take it from a window in my Explorer and drag it into my sprites folder. So when I have done that, I will have to add a button to my screen. So we're going to take one button at a time, or basically we're going to add one and then we can duplicate it and change the sprite. So to add a button, we will have to go to the menu called create, and under here we have a UI, and this UI menu here is bound to their new UI system from Unity 4.6. So it's okay, it's not that new anymore, but it is a replacement of their old system. If you click on the UI, you'll see some different elements here, and the one that we are going to use is called a button. When you click on the button, you will get a canvas if you didn't have a canvas already, and you will get an event system. So the event system is used for us to be able to click our buttons. So when we click a button, an event can be sent, and we can make some code that listens to this button click and react on it. So we will need to keep this event system. Besides that, it also creates the canvas, and the canvas is what is used to render our UI elements. So every single UI element we create, its buttons, its text, and so on, will have to be a child object of a canvas. You can have more canvases in your scene, or you can have only one and put more UI elements under the same canvas. If I take this button here and move it outside my canvas, this is not something you should do, I'm just demonstrating, you'll see that the button disappears, and that's because it needs to be a child object of a canvas to be able to be rendered to the screen. So we take our button and put it back under our canvas, and you'll see that it actually gets rendered to the screen right now. So we will need our canvas to render our buttons. So first of all, this button doesn't look anything like a move button or a tag button or something, so we will have to change the sprite. If you click on the button, you'll see that it has an image script on it, and this image script is actually the sprite that we are seeing right here on the screen. So we'll have to change the source image of this sprite. So we can simply go to our buttons folder, select the button, and then you can select the button you would like to create. The first button I would like to create is the run right. So I'm going to take my run right icon here, or sprite, and drag it onto the source image. So if you can't drag this one onto the source image and it doesn't allow you to do so, it might be because your texture type is wrong. So if you click on your sprites and your texture type is set to texture or something, then you won't be able to use it with 2D UI elements. So click on it and then select sprite, 2D and UI here if it didn't work. But it's only if it didn't work you have to do that. So you might have noticed that this doesn't have the right proportions right now. It's very squashed together and it doesn't look anything like a run button. So to fix this, there is a little button here called set native size. So you simply have to select your button and then click on the set native size, and you'll see now it has the right aspect that it should have, but it's still way too big, but we'll fix that in a minute. Besides that, we also have a text on it. As you can see, there's a written button here, and our buttons are based on images, which means that we don't need to write run right, run left, attack and jump and so on. So instead of having text on it, we'll simply just have to remove it. So if you expand your button on the little arrow, you'll see a text here, and the text here needs to be deleted. So now we don't have a text, and our button looks just like they did in my intro. But of course it's still too big, but let's fix that in a few minutes here. So besides this big button here, we will also have a run right, and you can see this one is run left, sorry, and this one is run right, and we don't have a run left button here. And that's simply because we're just going to flip this button to make it look like it's running to the left instead. So we don't need an extra sprite. Besides that, I would like to create an element that actually keeps track of my buttons or keeps them in line, so that we can line them. We could create more buttons like so, and then move them out and try to make the same space between them, like by doing this and then making sure that we have the right height on all of the buttons and everything. But there's actually some components in Unity that allows you to do this way easier. But we have the button here, and let's just right click on canvas and then select create empty. And this new game object we press F2 on, and we call it or actually no, I don't want to create empty, sorry. I want to right click on it, I want to select UI, and I want to select an image. And on this image it has an image component. We simply right click on that component and remove component. So we simply have an empty game object with a rect transform, because all UI elements has a rect transform on them. And as you can see here, a normal game object has a transform on it, but we want to work with UI, so that's why I added an image instead of adding a normal empty game object. So we have this rect transform, and this image here we will have to rename to button panel. That makes sense. So now we have a button panel, and this button here should be a child object of my button panel. So now that we have our button panel, we can actually right click on our button and duplicate it. So now we have two buttons on top of each other, and let's rename them so that we know which button is which. So take the first one and call it right, and take the second one and rename it to left. And let's just move it a little out here so we can see both of them. As you can see, they look exactly the same, but we would like to, or actually let's move left on the left side, that makes more sense, and right on the right side here. There we go. So right now they look the same, so we can't tell which one is run left and which one is run right. So select the left button, and then you can see there's something called scale here, and it's just 1. And basically if you put -1, you'll see that it flips to the left side here. But the buttons are still kind of big, and maybe I would like them to be half this size or something. So basically I want to put the scale to -0.5, like so, and the Y scale also just 0.5. There we go. So now it has a better size. I want to do the same for the right one. Select the right one and call this one 0.5, and the Y scale 0.5. So now I think the scale is kind of okay. This size is fine for me, but I would like to be able to place these buttons with the same spacing. And we are going to have more buttons here. So basically we can take the right one, duplicate it, right click, duplicate, and let's rename it to throw. And then we take the knife and replace the sprite on throw, duplicate throw, and rename it to attack. Attack, and take the sword, replace the sprite. And we also need a jump and a slide, so duplicate this, rename to slide. And you can of course do this in the order you want to, or replace them in the order and everything. And duplicate slide and make a jump. Take jump here and put it here and rename it to jump. So now we have all our buttons, but as you can see here, they are not placed correctly. There's like an OK space here, and then there, like this one is on top of the other and everything. So instead of us just sitting and replacing these or placing them correctly by eye measuring, we can actually go to our button panel, and on our button panel we would like to add a grid layout group. So add component and write grid, and you'll see there is something called a grid layout group. If we add this layout group here, you'll see that it just places our buttons in a weird way, but we will fix that soon. And the grid layout group is basically a way of placing UI elements in a grid, so that we can place them as we want them. As you can see, it also scaled it down, so maybe we didn't even need to scale our buttons by hand by taking this scale here, because apparently the layout group is overriding that. First of all, we will need to put our cell size. I want to try 150 multiplied by 150. They're still a little small, but yeah, let's see what happens when we start playing the game. So 150 and 150 is the cell size. So this decides how big our buttons are. So if we write 200 and 200, you'll see that they get larger again, as you can see here. So basically you can put the size that you want here to make them fit your needs. Then there is something called spacing. Let's wait a little minute with that. We will have to set up how the buttons should be on the screen. And you can see here there is something called a constraint here. And right now it's set to flexible, but we would like to set it to a fixed column count. So if we select a fixed column count, you'll see that we can select how many objects or how many buttons we want on the row here. And we can just say our column count is 6. So now you can see that there are 6 buttons placed here. We can take and move them a little in and a little down if that's what we want. And now we can start playing around with the spacing here. So basically you can see they're way too far apart. So I can say that the spacing should be maybe -50. And then you'll see that these buttons get even closer. And again, you can always change the size of them if you want them to be larger on your screen, as you can see here. So, and then you can just place them basically in the middle of your screen here. So now I have there's some buttons placed correctly here. If you want to make sure that they are in the middle, you can also select the tool to the far right. And when you have selected that tool, you can see that there is a little box here, and that's basically our button panel, and it's the size of the button panel and everything. So if we want the buttons to be exactly in the middle of the canvas, we can take this button panel and stretch it out so that it goes all the way to the right, and stretch it down so it goes all the way to the button. You can see when you hit the line, it turns orange. And in the left side, you can take this one and squeeze it in so it fits with the left side. So now all these buttons here are placed in the middle of our screen with the same space in both sides here, because this the button panel is fitted with the canvas size. Let's see, if we play our game now, let's say if I go in full screen and play the game, you'll see that the buttons move around and they're in the middle of the screen and they're smaller and everything. And we're not interested in that. We would like them to keep the same aspect as we have here, so that we can place them without playing our game and then have the same aspect during our gameplay. So if we select the canvas here and we go to the canvas component, you'll see there's something called screen space overlay, and that's totally fine. The rendering mode is screen space overlay, so that we're using UI element on our screen no matter where we are in our game world. But as you can see underneath, we have something called a canvas scaler, and the canvas scale is set to a constant pixel size. So because it has a constant pixel size, it will have the same pixel size regardless of the screen resolution. So 10 pixels is maybe a lot on this screen, but when I enlarge it, when I go in full screen mode, full HD or something, then 10 pixels is not a lot. So I can actually do something so that they scale with the screen size by selecting this constant pixel size and then select scale with screen size. And as you can see here, they already scaled up and now they don't fit here anymore. So I have to go down to my button panel maybe and change the cell size to 150 and 150, and then take my button panel and then drag it so that it fits again. If I could even pick this one up, there we go, and there we go. So now they're not placed in the middle anymore, as you can see here, because they are because they're scaling with the screen size. So to make sure that they are in the middle center, we can go to our button panel, and then there's something called giant alignment here, and here you can click and select the middle center, and then you can see now the child objects, which are our buttons, they are aligned in the middle center of our button panel. And if you want them closer to the bottom, you can always scale this one down a little if you want them closer to the bottom of the screen, and so on. So now our buttons should be placed correctly, and if we maximize and play, you'll see that they're still large here and they're placed in the bottom at the correct positions and everything. So now there's no problems with them scaling up or down and being placed in the middle of the screen. So I am going to end this video here. In the next video, we are going to take a look at how we can actually add some functionality to these buttons. Thanks for watching the video, and remember to like my Facebook page, follow me on Twitter, and of course don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Also, if you like my videos and you would like to support me, then please don't forget to support me on either Patreon or support me by downloading this simple project here. If you support me on Patreon, you can also get some different perks like all my projects or get some private tutoring.